John, what's going on, man?
It's cold in here. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's good for hockey.
About it.
That's
it's
good.
Hot out there. It's cold in here. It's all good.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of hot, Bobrovsky is hot. It's so hot that he might be melting the ice. He's certainly melting the brains of the Carolina Hurricanes right now. They couldn't break him in 4 overtimes. They couldn't necessarily break him on Saturday night, and now they found themselves 0-2 in this series, John. I mean, I know it's oversimplification to say that Bobrovsky and goaltending has been the difference, but he has been outstanding throughout the entire playoffs.
Goaltending, Joe, is always the difference. I don't care if it's 1920 or 2023 or whether we have analytics or all kinds of numbers that support how teams play. In hockey, with the randomness that exists in hockey, the one defining line is the goalie. So you can control the game in all aspects and have a ton of shots and quality chances, the old high danger chances, if the goalie's on his game. And the thing about it here is, is Sergei Bobrovsky hot or is Sergei Bobrovsky that good? I mean, his resume will suggest that he's that good. So he's an elite goalie. That's kind of been on this roller coaster over the last couple of seasons. But this season was able to right his ship. He was ill and injured at the end of the year, which forced Paul Maurice to make a change and go with a young kid, Alex Lyon, which put them in a position to at least compete for a playoff spot. But now, since Bob has taken over, he is the difference. He's the difference in every game, and whoever decides to play tonight for the Hurricanes will have to match that.
John, your hockey knowledge is like unmatched. I was in awe in game 1. Here we are, 4 overtimes. I'm ready to pass out on press row there, and I hear your voice behind me, and I'm like, how in the world? And I get it. You're not playing. I get that part of it. But I'm sitting here going, how the hell is he doing this? Like, I'm ready to fall asleep.
I don't know.
And I get it. You've called the Canes games before. I'm not trying to say you haven't, but I'm sitting here going, how does he know these names the way that he knows these names? How is he not missing a beat? A masterful performance by you. I would like to start by saying that it was a nice treat to hear your voice like an angel over my shoulder.
Thank you.
But I agree with Joe.
It's so soothing. Like, it's very familiar to me. I just needed like a warm cookie and a picture of my Nana. Like, it was like, oh, okay, this is very nice. But your knowledge of hockey really is unbelievable. So I'm asking you this question. Can you remember another example of a team trading their best player, obviously for contract reasons with Huberdeau, and getting a guy back in Tkachuk? And I know it didn't work right away. I know it didn't fit right away because this was a team that won the President's Trophy last year. But could you remember, is there anything that's analogous to this that's happened where, a guy like Paul Maurice makes the pieces work and it's crazy to think about.
Yeah, I don't. And thank you for all of that. And my wife will tell you that's the only thing I do right. So is call the game. So anyway, so that's good. No, I don't remember a trade like this. Elite for elite, record-setting forward in terms of assists, top scorer, Huberdeau, off he goes. Really good piece in the back end. Mackenzie Weegar, right-handed shot. Brandon Montour has sailed right by him, has taken over that role in this team. But Matthew Tkachuk, he's a finalist, as you know, for the Hart Trophy as the MVP. Remarkable. Added a dimension that they probably needed. I mean, I had them in the playoffs last year. I had them in the first round against Washington. I called the sweep by Tampa Bay over Florida. And when we left Tampa, Florida looked like a train wreck. They had some off-ice issues the night before Game 4. They had the coaching change. Someone was going to take the blame for that. They want to establish a better culture. And by doing that, they made a coaching change and brought in essence, Matthew Tkachuk to kind of change their dynamic from a really good East-West skilled team with not a lot of grit, not a lot of bite, a little bit, but not a lot, to a guy who brings in a dynamic that is all of that. Plus, he's one of the best pests in the National Hockey League. He's right there with Marchand, the way he plays. He will curtail most of that in the playoffs and not go there. But, it's great to watch. So, no, I don't recall, because you're talking about a hockey trade. This wasn't the peddling of a potential free agent or a money situation and you're getting futures in return. This was player for player. This was, take this guy off our hands. They had to re-sign Huberdeau. Calgary did all that. Same with Weegar, but so did Florida. Florida had to re-sign Tkachuk, gave him a big ticket, and he's the face of their franchise now. And it's a great face. It looks good on him.
John Forslund, play-by-play for the Seattle Kraken, former Carolina Hurricanes, play-by-play. He's doing radio for this call between the Panthers and the Hurricanes, and he's joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. All right, John, I do want to tap into, and I was very excited to see you up in the building, and I wanted to tap into your Canes history here because we've seen instances where the Hurricanes have broken teams in the playoffs. I mean, everybody can remember Montreal, right? The Molson Miracle and everything else. But we've also seen it on the flip side, and it was related to extended overtimes. We saw this in 2002 with the Detroit Red Wings in the Cup. And if the Canes just take care of business there, who knows how things are. You and I have had this conversation. Like, how does that series go if they actually win that overtime? And I feel like the Canes might be on that end of the spectrum after what happened at PNC Arena the last two nights. I felt like the Canes felt confident coming out of a 4 overtime loss that they could try to take advantage of a tired Florida team and potentially tired Bobrovsky. And they absolutely dominated in that first period, and they still only came away with 1 goal after the one other goal was taken off because of offsides. And then they lose in overtime again. I know it's a resilient group, but we've seen series-changing moments like this for the Canes, both good and bad. How do you kind of see this going forward for them after what can easily be a completely deflating way to lose again?
See, I read the first period differently, and I'll tell you why. The shot volume was obvious, right? The shot volume in that building is all, and I said it on the air. I've spent enough time in that arena, and I will defy that shot clock. I'll go to war for Cam Ward, who used to complain about shot clock over and over again. But the Hurricanes, to their credit, that's their style. Yeah. They flood shots. They go high volume with shots. To me, if they're going to get better in this series, they need to be on the inside of the ice more in the slot. If you're going to go one and done from 30 feet out on Bob, forget it. So you're going to have to get in there and be able to get the inside track on some of these D, Ekblad, Mark Stahl, Gudis. These guys are strong. They box out well. Canes are going to have to be better in the house, in the interior of the ice. But what happened was, as the period went along, it's 1-0 Hurricanes. I'm working with Jimmy Fox. He's doing a great job for us on Sports USA. We look at each other and I say, if I'm Florida, I kind of like the period. Okay. And I forget what the shots were, 20 to 8 officially. The scoreboard at 20 to 11. So then we got the laptop out and we looked up the analytics, which I'm not a big fan of, but I do use them a lot because I think it supports eye test, right? In the old days, we'd say, well, this is a good game. Somebody would say, why? And you'd say, well, because I told you it's a good game. There was nothing to support. That's the beauty of analytics today. We have information. So we flop it open here and we look at the analytics, and high dangers were 9-4 Florida in the first period. All the possession time started to tilt towards the Panthers, I'd say from the 10-minute mark on in the first period. So I think they went to their room confident. I think Paul Maurice just had to say, boys, a little bit more, but not much. We're okay. Mm-hmm. You would think playing in Raleigh with that crowd and the 4 overtimes as you laid out, and if you look at the shots and you're just reading the box score, you would say, wow, Bobrovsky's best player in the game. And he was good, but he didn't have to get to that stealing nature of his game, I think, until later. So I think Florida has really done well in all the periods that we've seen. And we're playing game 3 tonight, but this is like game 4 in terms of periods, right? So there's been a lot of hockey played here. And I think it's close. It's obviously close. Both games went to overtime. But I do think Florida right now has a big edge for me in terms of how they're playing. And even though you hear Rod talk about one shot and game of inches and anything's possible, he's right. Jarvis hits the empty net, and the other night hits the crossbar flush. mean, we're probably in a different narrative right now. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is where we're at. And I think the Canes have a step. They have to take a step as a team to get there. And if they don't, then they're going to have, if they have the worst case scenario in this series, for me, that's got to be addressed, because that's been an issue with this team for the last few years, as far as I'm concerned.
John Forslund, play-by-play, Seattle Kraken, former Carolina Hurricanes play-by-play, joining us on the Heaster Automotive Group hotline. About Paul Maurice, I do feel, and I said this when the series was set between the Panthers and the Canes, that you couldn't have asked for a better 25th anniversary, as all the history and everybody kind of reminiscing. You couldn't ask for a better setup in the finals because of the players on the other side, with Eric Staal and obviously Paul Maurice and his relationship with all two former captains and whatnot. But I think it was finally Brind'Amour, I want to say it was with TSN, finally gave a little bit more insight as to what that relationship is. And I preface this, John, by saying, look, you do this long enough, you're going to have a history with just about everybody. And hockey is a very, very small community at the end of the day. And obviously, they're both successful in their own different ways. But I kind of got the sense that there are still some unresolved issues from Rod's end here at Carolina as a player and Paul Maurice's position in that end. Is that fair?
That's really fair. It was hard to watch then. It's interesting to look back at it now. Only the two of them really know exactly what happened. But I was around it enough to remember. I remember when he was healthy scratched in Pittsburgh, and we walked back to the hotel after the morning skate, and we watched the line rushes, and 17 wasn't part of it. Then we watched him stay out, and I stayed an extra bit of time to see who was going to skate extra with the assistant coaches. And it was Rod Brind'Amour, and everything was hush hush. And we had to make sure that there wasn't an injury or something going on with him, and it wasn't. So that was tough. And he then came back into the lineup, and I don't exactly recall what happened after that, but I do know that players never forget those things. I mean, I work with a guy on a regular basis in Eddie Olczyk that'll tell you 18,000 Mike Keenan stories from his brief time with the New York Rangers. And Eddie had an outstanding NHL career, as you know, but they don't forget those. They have, sometimes they can recall the great moments, and sometimes that's fuzzier than the tough times. The tough times they never forget. So we all go through it. We all have situations in our career where you feel like, well, wait a minute, I'm getting the short ends of the stick here. At some point, you have to put those feelings away and carry on. And both guys did here. I think Paul was in a tough spot. Jim Rutherford wanted to move on from Rod, and Rod was going to have to be dragged out of that room. So Eric's contract was coming around the corner, and he needed a big ticket. To support the big ticket, it's always been the case. They did it in Pittsburgh with Crosby. They gave him the captaincy when he was basically a teenager because they knew he'd be the best player. So they were trying to force Eric into another step. And I felt at the time, and I said it, they were force-feeding the captaincy on Eric Staal. They did. But in order to do that, you had to do something with Rod Brind'Amour. Really unfortunate, but that's the nature of pro sports, and that's how things evolve.
John Forslund joining us here on the Heaster Automotive Group hotline. And it's funny, John, all great points there. But I'm watching the NBA playoffs, and we have this tendency to think, oh, what does coaching matter, right? And then you look at the Celtics, and you're like, oh, my gosh, it matters a whole lot. And then you think about hockey, and even Rod said to us before the series, as a player, he was like, what does coaching matter, right? Like, all right, you got to put your best players in the right spot and get them out there and get the right lineup combos. But on both sides here, if you want, Rod, obviously the culture that he has developed here has been amazing. And Mo has been obviously a little bit more nomadic in different spots, and he's had success in different spots. And of course, when you have the kind of personality that he does, it kind of grinds out a little bit. But if you want to start with Rod, and just it feels like everything he's done is right, including, having the team be able to recover from these injuries here at the end of the season. And then maybe a little bit on Mo in a difficult situation that he's kind of gone into, and maybe whatever buttons he had to push just to get this team into the bracket.
Yeah, in most cases, he had to have Matt Tkachuk's dad call into a sports radio show in Toronto. See the power that you guys have? He had to call in the morning of the game, and basically call the team soft and getting what they deserve and all of this. I remember I was in Seattle. It was an off day, and I was watching that game specifically. I watched it from start to finish, and it wasn't going the way the Panthers, and Mo snapped on the bench. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when he snaps, it gets the attention, you know, and I think that's the key for all coaches. You know, where's the attention point? Because there's always a meeting after the meeting. A coach has a meeting, and then the coach leaves the room, and then the players have the meeting. And the players either say, that guy is, you know, out there where the buses don't run, we're going to do this, or he made a really good point, let's do this. When Mo snaps, he doesn't always snap, right? So there's like, wow, what's happening here? And whatever he said, I know he went in the direction of Matthew Tkachuk and gave him an earful too. And so when the player's dad, who's a great player, calls a sports talk show in Toronto in the morning of the game and says, my son's team is soft. I think I did that when my boy Matthew was like 13 playing AAA hockey in Raleigh. I might have done that. We all have our weak moments, but certainly not at this level and not when you're Keith Tkachuk. But it worked. And so with Mo, I think he's always used his intelligence to figure out a way. He's changed a lot. I mean, when he coached the Hartford Whalers in 1995, I can't even, this is not even the same person. Like, so time changes for all of us and you have to evolve in your profession. He has. And so he's different. He'll tell you that. For Rod, I think what we always forget, I know you guys don't, but some people do, is like Tom Dundon decided to go to Rod Brind'Amour, and there was this great awakening and a great, brilliant move, and look at the great coach he's become. Well, he was an assistant for 7 years. And in those 7 years, he took good and bad from the two guys, well, actually 3 guys, because Mo brought him in first, then there was Kirk Muller, and then there was Bill Peters. And there's good stuff and flaws all over the map with all those people. And those teams were not very good, as we know. And I watched Rod do the work. And sometimes his voice was heard. And a lot of times he was over in the side of the coach's office. And sometimes his opinion wasn't even asked for. Okay. But in that time, he figured out, you know what? I want to make a run at this. And before he decided to tell Tom that he wanted to be the coach, he asked a bunch of us, you know, what do you think? And if you were one of those people, and I was, and I told him, I said, why are you asking me? He goes, just tell me what you think. I said, Roddy, I think you can do anything. And I also believe if you never change, you're going to be great. Because coaches do change. Some of these guys that coach in pro sports are not the same individuals they were when they were players. You know, they almost become the negative side of what they didn't like when they played, right? Well, Rod's never changed. All he's asked for is his kids to work exceptionally hard and believe in him. And so when Tom did that, it was a stroke of genius. It did work out great. He did put him in a position without any head coaching experience. I don't know if it was a position to fail, because with this group, he could only succeed. And, you know, he turned everything around and he adapted in his ways into a culture now that the Hurricanes can hang a hat on. So when you have identity as an organization, that's a good thing. And that's one thing I will say about the Hurricanes. They have identity now, but the only reason they have that is Rod Brind'Amour. The only reason.
John Forslund, play-by-play, Seattle Kraken, former Carolina Hurricanes, play-by-play. You were talking about sports talk radio and people calling in. We'll close on this. I vaguely remember my early days on 850 The Buzz. I want to say it was Primo's wife who called into Adam Gold's show, because she was mad with how the way things were being discussed. So she called. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
You're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Oh, it's great. Oh, it's great. Yeah, it's great.
Now what people do is they call in a podcast. That's what we're going to do here going forward. All right, John, we appreciate it. It's good to see you up in the building. I'm pretty sure we're going to see you back in the building. This is not going to be a sweep. We'll see you back at PNC Arena this week. All right.
Good luck with this. All the best to both of you.
Thank you, John. We appreciate your help, man, and all the support.